Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress. Only 15 days till the World Championship match will start between Carlsen and Caruana on November 9th in London. On Chess to Impress we continue the countdown towards a great event by looking at all the previous matches for the World Championship. We've arrived in 1995, where World Champion Garry Kasparov defended his title against Viswanathan Anand. As I explained in the previous video, the top of the chess world had broken in two. Kasparov and Short had broken away from FIDE, the world governing chess body, and had set up the PCA, the Professional Chess Association. Many top players played in both the FIDE and the PCA World Championship. These were the candidates matches from the PCA side, and Gata Kamsky very convincingly beat Vladimir Kramnik in the quarterfinals. Short beat Gulko, Adams overcame Tiviakov, and Anand defeated Romanishin. In the semi-finals, Kamsky beat Short 5.5, 1.5. What a win that was for Kamsky. And Anand defeated Adams by the same score. In the final, Anand beat Kamsky 6.5, 4.5 and qualified to challenge world champion Garry Kasparov. A nice trivia is that the quarterfinal matches were held at the Trump Tower in New York City in June 1994, and the matches were opened by, yes, Donald Trump. The semi-finals were played in Linares in Spain in September 94 and the final in Las Palmas in March 95. The World Championship match from September 10th to October 16th, 1995 took place on the 107th floor of the South Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. The match was over 20 games. Here we see both players in action, the challenger Viswanathan Anand on the left and world champion, the classical world champion Garry Kasparov on the right. As you can see, the match started with 8 draws. Then Anand, very surprisingly, was the first to score a point. He won game 9. Kasparov hit back straight away in game 10, and in this video we're going to look at what happened in game 11. Let's get into it. The game was played on the 28th of September 1995. White was Anand, black Kasparov, e4. Anand only played e4 in those days. Kasparov played his beloved Sicilian, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes, knight f6 and knight c3. In game 9 Kasparov had played a6 here, his favorite Najdorf variation, which moved into a Scheveningen Sicilian, and Anand beat Kasparov in that game. But for this game Kasparov had prepared a big surprise. He plays the dragon variation with g6 for the first time in his career. Anand must have been shocked, thought for a while and played bishop e3. He decided to go for the sharpest continuation, the so-called Yugoslav attack. Bishop g7, that's the famous dragon bishop. It's this piece combined with play on the c-file that are black's main trump cards. For this video I use the analysis of Grandmaster Daniel King in the book that he wrote about this match. f3, black castled, queen d2, knight c6, bishop c4, all played thousands of times before, bishop d7, and Anand castled queenside. Opposite castling always guarantees an exciting fight. Knight e5, attacking the bishop on c4, bishop steps back, rook c8, and h4. With the idea of h5 to break up the position on the king side. As I said, this is a theoretical position that has been played thousands of times before. Kasparov doesn't allow h5, he plays h5 himself. Anand steps out of the c-file with his king. Knight c4, that knight was taken. Rook takes and knight d to e2. White wants to go after the dragon bishop, but cannot do that directly. Knight e2 also protects the knight on c3 to discourage any ideas of exchange sacrifices on c3, which is one of the standard ways for black to get play on the queen side. As I said, bishop h6 to go after the dragon bishop is premature because of rook takes d4. Nice move. Queen takes and bishop takes h6. Black has won 2 pieces for the rook with the better position, even though white can take pawn on a7. So knight d to e2 was played by Anand, preparing bishop h6. b5, with the idea of b4 to open up the c-file. There goes the bishop to h6 as planned, and here b4 was more popular in past Grandmaster games, but Kasparov chose queen a5. He must have prepared that move for this game. Now there's a standard combination which starts with knight d5, using the fact that the queen on a5 is unprotected, but that doesn't really work for white in this version. Let's have a quick look. Black has to take the queen, then white has an in-between move. Knight takes e7 is check, king h7, bishop takes d2, and rook e8. Black wins a piece, says Grandmaster King, but the engine in 2018 shows that it's not that simple. White can play b3 and bishop f4 and maintain equality. After queen a5, Anand did not play knight d5, he took that bishop straight away, and now that mighty dragon bishop is gone, and that's a little success for white. King takes and knight f4. Kasparov doubles on the c-file and knight cd5. Grandmaster King explains that white has to simplify the position to avoid getting hammered on the queen side. Black has a lot of heavy material on that side of the board. The queens were swapped, and actually Kasparov offered a draw after queen takes d2. Anand declined. He took back, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, king f8 to protect the e7 pawn, and rook e1. There is really no weakness in black's camp to latch onto. The position is about equal. Rook b8 played after 20 minutes of thought, but it's not clear what Kasparov's intentions are with that move. 2 moves later we see the rook return to c8. b3, rook step back, knight back to f4, and the rook back to c8. King b2, a5, a3, and king g7. And Grandmaster King writes, Kasparov is setting a cunning trap. Let's look what he had up his sleeve. Knight e5 from Anand, bishop e6, and now white can make a draw with knight takes e7, rook e8, knight back to d5, bishop takes, and you cannot take with the rook, because then there is rook takes d5 and the e-pawn is pinned. That wins for black, but after bishop takes d5 you can play the in-between move b4, hitting the rook. A takes, rook c4 to save that rook, and then you can take on d5. Rook takes b4 check, king c1, and a move like f5, and this is about equal. But after bishop e6, Anand decided not to take on e7, he played b4, attacking the rook. A takes, and it looks like the rook doesn't have any squares. If he moves his rook on the c-file, there will be a knight fork. Rook c4. Anand sensed no danger, and as Grandmaster King writes, Kasparov displayed all the innocence of a man-eating crocodile. Nice quote. Here knight takes e7 should still be a draw, as was analyzed, but Anand played the fork, knight b6, forking both rooks. He thought that Kasparov would sacrifice in exchange and try to make a draw that way. Kasparov took on b4, check, king a3, and now both rooks are hanging. But Kasparov dropped a bomb, rook takes c2, what a shot. He removed himself from the board to let Anand ponder what happened and suffer. Anand saw nothing better than resign this game. What's happening here? Why did Anand resign? Both rooks are hanging, what if we take that rook? Well, that's simple, then there's rook takes d2, king takes b5, rook takes g2, and black is 2 pawns up, has a winning endgame. What about if we take the other rook? Rook takes c2. What happens then? Well, there is Kasparov's trick. Rook b3 check is the move, defended by the bishop, and the king has only one square. King a2, and then there is a discover check, rook e3 check, picking up the rook on e1, which is unprotected. King b2, rook takes e1, and black is also 2 pawns up in this position. White has no compensation, no counterplay. This is an easily technical win for players of the caliber of Kasparov and Anand. So after 8 draws and a shock defeat, Kasparov won 2 games in a row. In fact, after the draw in game 12, he won 2 more games. So between games 10 and 14, he scored 4.5 points. Anand only mentioned 1 draw in those 5 games. The last 4 games were drawn, and that got Kasparov to the 10.5 points he needed to win the match and retain his title. But it was not the last we saw of Anand. In 2000, Anand won the FIDE World Championship, and when the titles became unified again, he became the undisputed world champion in 2007 and kept the title till 2013. So we see a lot more of Anand later in the series. In the years that followed, there was a lot of activity on the FIDE World Championship side, but not so much on the Classical World Championship side. It took 5 years for Kasparov to defend his title again against Vladimir Kramnik in the year 2000, and I'll tell you all about that match in the next video. Hope you enjoyed this video on the Kasparov-Anand match. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you like the series, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. The link to the series is here. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.